Hello, I'm Dr. Ryan Anderson. I'm one of the co-founders of Telos U, and this is the first in a three-part webinar on the concept of getting out of the box. We have put so much time into helping you learn this particular idea because everything else that we're going to teach you, every tool, every perspective, every approach, is dependent on your ability to understand and apply this really important concept. And as the title here implies, we see this as both a key to your personal peace, but also the core of your influence and the most important thing that you can do to help us help things go right for your child with us during their stay here at Telos U. These ideas didn't start with us. These ideas originated with an organization known as the Arbinger Institute. They do a lot of training and they have produced a lot of different books and pamphlets and websites and webinars, all of which are fantastic. Here at Telos, we use the anatomy of peace and the outward mindset as two of our core pieces of structure and understanding for everything else we've built our program on. We hope that while you are with us, you will not only just watch these webinars, but that you will take the time to read either the anatomy of peace or the outward mindset, or to review them both if these are things that you've become familiar with in the past. But let's go ahead and dive in with the basics of these concepts. So today we're going to talk specifically in part one, this webinar, about way of being, light and choice point, self-betrayal and objectification. The other two webinars will deal with self-deception, justification, and rationalization, the concept of the box and box styles. And the third webinar will talk about how we can get out of the box. So let's begin. We're going to talk at TLSU a lot about behaviors. In fact, one of the sectors of our clinical wheel is specifically learned behaviors. And most of the time when people talk to us about their concerns about their children, they do spend a lot of time talking about behaviors. And behaviors are important, including our behaviors towards your child while they are here, and your behaviors working together with us in that process. But we need to understand that the core of our influence, for good or for bad, goes deeper than behavior. People tend to respond much more powerfully to our way of being towards them than they do to the behaviors that we're displaying on the surface. And we're going to talk a lot more about that concept. But because of this truth, it means that you or I can technically do all the right things as far as our strategy, our approach. We can share techniques we read in books, say things exactly the way we've heard therapists say things. We can quote Brene Brown up and down. We can do all the right things. And yet still, our influence will play out and come across and be received differently than we would hope it would. And there are a number of different reasons why that can happen, but frequently the reason is that there's a discrepancy, that there's a struggle somewhere in our way of being, and that is getting in the way of us being able to be positively influential in the way that we want to. This is something that we're constantly working on ourselves as we work with your son or daughter here at Telos U. And it's something we constantly have to examine in ourselves as well. So always in everything we do, we start with examining our way of being. If things aren't working well, we take a look at our way of being first. When we prepare any kind of intervention, we review where is our way of being. It's that important. Everything else hinges on it. Now, it is true that when you take a look at human behavior, there is a vast range of things that we can do. But when you look under the surface at the things that drive us, at that deeper level, the way of being, there are essentially just two ways of being, and everything else flows from them. So the first way goes by a couple of different names in the Arbinger literature. They'll refer to it as responsive, having a heart at peace, being out of the box, or having an outward mindset. All of these are referring to the same thing, and it has to do with the way we perceive both ourselves and other people. And there's a lot of pieces to that that we'll go into more deeply. But this is our first way of being, and this is our way of approaching the world. In this responsive way, there are a couple of key features to it. This quote here is from a book called The Choice, and it says, "One way of being is to see others as they are, as people. And seeing them as people, I am responsive to their reality, their concerns, their hopes, their needs, their fears. Others are as real to me as I am to myself. Seeing others truly, I am true." So this means that in this way of being, we are opening up enough space for the existence of other people that we can see their humanity in both their strengths and in their weaknesses, in the good things they're doing, in the bad things they're doing. And when we see their strengths, we're not seeing those as a threat to ourselves, a way in which they're better than us or we're better than them. When we see their weaknesses and their struggles, we're not making that about us. We see it as a part of their human experience. And we can relate to both having strengths and weaknesses. We can relate to those various aspects of what it means to be human and what we need when we are demonstrating our strengths, as well as what we need and want and desire from other people when we are struggling. We're open to that completely. The second way is very different. And again, these are different terms that Arbinger uses for the same idea. It's a resistant way of being. In this way, our heart is at war with other people. We're in the box towards other people, and we'll explain more about what that means in the next webinar. And we have an inward mindset focused on ourselves, our reality, our needs, our wants, our feelings, and giving those priority above those of other people, seeing them as more important, more preeminent, more worthy of prioritization than those of other people. So, as it says in the book, The Choice, the other way is to see people as objects. Seeing them as objects, I am resistant to their reality. If I see others at all, they are less than I am, less relevant, less important, less real. Seeing people as less than they are, I am deceived about their reality. Seeing others falsely, I am false. Now that's an interesting quote. Seeing others falsely, I am false. What is meant by that? Well, our way of being, when we understand the way it works psychologically, is actually our lens through which we see the whole world. We don't see the world objectively. We see the world as we are, not as the world is. And so when we are seeing other people falsely as something other than they are, something less than what they are, as a two-dimensional cartoon caricature of what they are, this creates a tremendous amount of cognitive and moral dissonance within us. And when we experience that dissonance, if we're being responsive, the way that we resolve that dissonance is by changing ourselves, by changing our views, our feelings, and our actions to make them conform more closely to the reality of the other person and the reality of the world around us. But in the resistant way, the way that we try to resolve that dissonance is to try to reconcile our misperceptions with reality through a process of justification, rationalization, and distortion and triangulation with other people who also are seeing the world or specific people in the same distorted way that we are seeing. So we become more and more false in our efforts to justify our false vision and to call it true when it is not. And that becomes our new need, our new drive, our new motivation. And that motivation competes with every other motivation that we have, including our feelings of love and our desire of the well-being for the people that otherwise we would be parenting or being a spouse to or being friends with. So in other words, when we see other people from this heart at war lens, it requires us to engage in kind of a psychological contortionist act. And of course, the more we contort ourselves, the more comfortable we are with those contortions until they become just our way of approaching the world or approaching that particular person that we tend to do this with. We'll examine this in greater detail later. So, a common misperception that people have as they begin to hear about this idea of responsive versus resistant is it's not unusual for people to say, oh, okay, well, being responsive means doing the things that feel like hard actions. Doing the things that feel like soft actions for being responsive. And being resistant is doing things that feel hard. So being responsive is giving someone what they want. Being resistant is not giving someone what they want. Now, it's easy to see how people would think that, but being responsive is not the same as being soft, and being resistant is actually not the same as being hard. So for example, let's think of two different types of behavior. Let's think about correction. Now, correction is something that I think most people would agree sounds like a hard behavior, because no one wakes up in the morning and says, boy, I'm really looking forward to being corrected today. It's something that's always emotionally taxing for us to some degree or another. But correcting someone can be done in either a responsive or a resistant way. Now let's think about a behavior that people tend to think of as soft, complimenting someone. Well, just because we're complimenting someone doesn't mean we're being responsive. That can also be done in either way. A compliment can be responsive or resistant. Let's take a look at that a little bit more deeply. In the book, The Choice, it talks about this by saying, but I can compliment or correct another because it will help them, or I can compliment or correct another because it will help me. One way, I'm seeing a person and I'm being responsive. The other way, I'm seeing an object and I'm being resistant. Almost any behavior can be done in either way. So responsiveness is not simply giving your child whatever they want. Because one of the things we recognize is that part of being a human being is that we're capable of wanting things that are actually harmful to us or to other people. And in that moment, giving that person what they want is destructive and not being responsive to them as a human. In fact, we may do it because what we want from them is for them not to be angry at us, or to think that we're the cool parent, or to not cause us problems, to not inconvenience us with a meltdown, but when they don't get what they want. Responsiveness is also not having no boundaries or expectations, because we all need boundaries and expectations. That's a fundamental part of being human. And when we ignore that, we're not being responsive. Again, we may be resistant for the same reasons we just spoke about. It's not letting yourself be an emotional doormat, and it's certainly not excusing abusive or destructive behaviors on the part of other people. But what it is exactly what we described before. It's seeing another person as a person with everything that that means, the complexity that goes into that. They have strengths, they have weaknesses. They, just like us, are works in progress. They have hopes, dreams, fears, and needs. They are capable of great things, but also, like every human being, they are capable of wanting things that are harmful for them. They're capable of doing damage to themselves and to other people. And so when we're truly being responsive, we recognize all of that about the humanity of other people, including our humanity. We see that we are all of those things too. And we are determined to be the ally of what is good for that other person. And we refuse to use them, even if it benefits us. That's what being responsive to other people means. So ask yourself this, going back to the example given before, how does it feel to you to be complimented by someone who is seeing you as a person and is trying to genuinely recognize the good in you and help you feel good about the good that is within you? How does that feel? Now compare and contrast that with someone who is complimenting you because they're trying to butter you up. They want something from you. They want to manipulate you. They want to push on something. You are the path to getting something that they want. And their compliment is not about you. It's about the response they want to get from you and the way that that's going to benefit them. See how that feels different? Now think for a moment, how do you tend to respond differently when you feel like someone is complimenting you in that responsive way versus when someone is complimenting you in that resistant way? How do you respond differently to those things on an emotional level? Now let's go on the other side. How does it feel when you're being corrected by someone that you know genuinely cares about you and they understand who you are and they have compassion for your struggles and they're coming to you because they're concerned and they want to help you get over something? They want to help you make a decision that will be positive for you and for the people around you. Now, compare and contrast that with when someone is correcting you because they dislike you. They want to embarrass you. They want to humiliate you. They're annoyed by you. They want to punch you down a couple of rungs on the ladder. Or they see you as competition. Or they see you as a burden. And they are correcting you to make you less of a burden, less of a threat, less competition to them. How do you find yourself responding differently emotionally to those two different ways of being corrected? See that way of being underneath? It's powerful. It's the core of your influence. As it says in the choice, whatever I do on the surface, people respond to who I am being while I am doing it. Way of being determines influence. And part of what we're trying to do while we're here at Telos is to be positive influences for good, for growth, for happiness and prosperity in a sustainable way for your child. And we need you to be equal partners with us in that process. That is why both we and you need to be very thoughtful and aware at all times of this core of our influence and constantly working on what will help us be influential in this positive way. So when we take a look at the outcome research for Telos, it is surprising to some people to find that some of our best predictors of success for our students isn't so much necessarily the techniques we use on the students, but the alliance we have with their parents and their parents' ability to do their own emotional work, to make progress in their way of being, to learn and become confident in the Telos knowledge and tools. So part of the reason we're focusing on this with you is you are the best ally we have and the best influence that we can bring to bear and refine to help us accomplish the mission that we're all here to accomplish. So let's talk a little bit more about this concept of being responsive to other people. All of us have a shared aspect to our humanity. You're a person, I'm a person. Your child is a person. And we all know what it feels like to be human. It's true, there's a lot of diversity, and the diversity in humanity is amazing. And it's an opportunity to explore and learn and connect and expand. But in all of that, there is a core of shared experience and emotion to the human experience for every person. And as a person, you know what it's like. You know what it feels like when other people are seeing you as a person and when other people are treating you the way a person should be treated. That sense of what it is to be a human, of how a person should be treated, is something that the Arbinger Institute has referred to as the light. It's the sense of their humanity sending out signals to us that we pick up on all kinds of levels. It's a beacon that beckons us and how we can treat and respond towards that other human being. And it sends out very real invitations for ways to see, feel, and respond to the people around us. Now, that light, it doesn't control us. It doesn't compel us. It only invites us. And as it says in the choice, as a person, I know what it means to be a person. I have a sense of what people need. For example, I see a person in need and I feel to help. My responsiveness to others is my deepest sense of what is right. But we're not slaves to that. I can resist this responsiveness towards others' needs. If I do, I betray my deepest sense of what is right. Betray my deepest sense of what is right, and I betray myself. I betrayed not only their humanity, but my own humanity in that moment. I'm no longer seeing them as human. Well, if I'm not seeing them as human fully, how are we seeing them? Well, the alternative is to see people as objects. And now when we do this, we don't really realize that we're doing it. But there's three different types of objects that we can see other people as. They can be obstacles. They stand between us and something we want, an objective, a feeling, a relationship, an outcome. This person feels like they are obstructing that. And when we see people as objects, it's our natural response to either combat the obstacle, seek to move it, seek to break it down, seek to destroy it, or surrender to it and see ourselves as its victim. Now, we can also see people as vehicles, as a way to get what we want. They have influence, they have resources, they have the key to certain things we want to experience, and therefore we can use them to get the things that we want. But once we have what we want, our consideration for them ends. Or people can also be irrelevant. They just really don't matter very much, if at all. What they think, what they feel, what they want, what they need, it's really just not important to us. And we don't give it thought and we don't give it consideration. Now, when we are objectifying people in this way, the first thing we hide from ourselves is that we are doing it. If you walk around and you're fully aware of the fact that you're objectifying people around you, again, that causes that dissonance that we were talking about. It's profoundly unpleasant. So we become deeply invested in seeing our distorted vision as the truth, as a way to make us not feel that. And we begin in all kinds of ways, both overt and covert, both aware and subconscious, of investing deeply in that way of seeing other people. So I want you to take a step back and just reflect on a couple of things. In this moment, right now, who are some of the people in your life that you feel like you are seeing as people, as fully human, as fully real as you are? Also, take a few moments to think about in this moment, right now, who are some people that you struggle to see that way, that you tend to see more as objects, as obstacles, as vehicles, as irrelevant, as less than? Who are those people? Now, in your relationship with your child who is here at Telos, can you identify times when you have seen them as a person, both their strengths and their weaknesses, their struggles, even when their struggles have been towards you, that you could see their humanity fully and be responsive to it? I'm sure you've had those experiences. You have probably also had the opposite experience. Can you identify times when you have seen your young adult child as an object? What is that like? How does that change the way you tend to see them when you see them that way? And how have you responded differently to them in those two ways of being? How has that affected your thoughts, your beliefs about them? How has that affected your feelings towards them? How has that affected the way you act towards them? And again, that's not just confrontation, but it can also be avoidance or enabling, or any of the things we do that are not being an ally to their best interest in that moment. And also consider the following. How has your child responded differently to you based on your way of being towards them? These are some heavy questions to think about. So I'd recommend before you go into the next webinar, where we'll dig more deeply into these concepts, you take some time to think about these questions and to write down your answers, and be prepared to discuss these with your child's therapist, but also be prepared to discuss these at some point in time in family therapy with your child. Now, you might feel a little bit nervous about relaying this to your child, being open about the fact that sometimes you do find yourself in that resistant way of being towards them. I want to reassure you, being able to be honest and open and own that is actually not something that will hurt your relationship with your child. It oftentimes is the first step towards healing and building your relationship with your child.